Welcome to Module 4. This is the last video I'm making before class starts for those of you that need to work ahead. As I believe I've stated earlier, I will try to have 4 modules out there so that you can work ahead on it. That means that 3 weeks ahead or 3 modules ahead. Probably 3 weeks ahead is where it's going to be, because there are some modules that may be more than 1 week. Not in this class as much as in others. But this week we're going to talk about other disciplines that study gender, why we look at it, those as well as sociologists. As we look at that, women's studies clearly studies gender from an interdisciplinary focus. And we know that psychology has strong embedded gender theories coming into place and speaks of gender on a regular basis. We'll talk about those in a minute when we talk especially about Freud. Family studies explores it through the role of family. Like women's studies, they're interdisciplinary, but focus on men and women in the context of the family. Now remember, as we're looking at these gender theories, as you saw within sociology, we're looking at both men and women when we look at gender theories and what comes into place. So, with that said, let's pop over quickly to the PowerPoints. And again, as with the last chapter, I'm giving you the full set of PowerPoints directly from the text, which is very different than the initial PowerPoints or those that will follow, just to give you this as an outline for the information you have in the chapter. And the chapter is well written and goes into things in so much more detail than you're going to see. As you've already noticed when you watched the video from the last module, you started to see how feminist movement came into place. This week you'll see the second and third part of that film. Breaking it down into those pieces, the movement across. Gender studies grew during that second wave of feminism that you're going to be watching, the 1960s and 70s. And the study of gender is inherently interdisciplinary because it comes from so many places. We have to look at biology, we have to look at psychology, sociology, the strong focus on family studies, which comes out of home economics. And home economics was to look at women's lives and make that them more powerful in their lives. It wasn't just cooking and cleaning. It was so much more. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. If you have some questions or want more information on that, get with me and I can share that wonderful, rich history of the social welfare pieces of why home economics, which is now called, in most places, consumer and science, family and consumer science. The sociology perspective on gender is clarified by contrast with other disciplines. It helps us to see why sociology, looking at society, versus psychology that is so often focused more on the individual perspectives. And it can see that contrast. It can see the differences that come from the economics. Remember, economics is a social science as well, or even the political science look at gender. So it gives us a more complete understanding. So psychology approaches. Psychologists were most interested in the individual, and they focus on the process of the mind and the brain. Now, some interesting studies out there that we know that women and men's brain do function somewhat differently. And we have found that out biologically. We have looked at some of those things psychologically that come into place. We have to understand that we all work in conjunction with each other. Freud located origins of gender into early childhood development, and he focused on how children unconsciously make sense of their anatomical differences. So anatomy really comes into place. He focused on the fact that children develop their masculine and feminine identities unconsciously, and that there were significant differences that come into place. So, as we look at Freud, we see that in general, he had the complexes of women actually with penisymmetry, and we talk about that. The power of the superego in Freud's theory is part of our personality, is responsible. And I want to quote this correctly, our person responsible both for our morality and for lining up our morality with these societal standards. The end result of women's underdeveloped superego is narcissism, where being loved is more important than loving. Interesting as he looked at the sexual differences. Sex different research examines this wide variety of traits and dispositions and behaviors that are different between men and women. So it focuses on that whole issue, that superego of that a woman needs to be loved more than she needs to love. So we see this coming into place, and we look at these examinations. It focuses mostly on those cognitive ability differences, and so we look at the difference of how we see things spatially, the mathematical, and the verbal differences. And women are more verbal than men. Remember that we're looking at both sides as we look at sex difference research out there. Then there are critiques that examine the problems with the sex difference research as we start to explore it and the usefulness of it. Okay, as we look at this, there are important ideas to take away here. The task of establishing that sex differences are complex and difficult. They don't always tie together to what we have our thought processes in place, and they are not the same for every person. But again, we're looking at the largest majority compared to the largest majority. It has implications well beyond the realm of research. Gender inequality in school and in the workplace. And again, I could refer back to that student who said women did not deserve equality. She could see that it has implications out there. So we have this fight down the road of whether the sex difference research can hurt us in the process. Is it better to separate girls from boys in teaching math because we learn differently, because our brains function differently? So it introduces important questions. What is the connection between differences and inequality? Is it that the opportunities aren't there? Is it the socialization that we've been told we haven't been in place? All of those things come in place. Some of the other theories that are reviewed in this chapter include queer theory. And queer theory begins with that deep suspicion of current intellectual discourse. It really comes into place. Sorry for the interruption there. I wanted to get the words right as we look at this, as we look at queer theory. And this is a derogatory term for most of you. Derogatory is not uh, unusual when you think about it as we explore some of the issues in sociology, that it's a form of empowerment that comes into place. But in queer theory, we can trace its beginnings to several different sources. Three main movements: the gay and lesbian rights, the postmodernism, post-structural, and the feminists have brought us together to this theory as we talk about it. So the key factors here is queer theory does not aim to solve problems of other theories. It does not aspire to be a meta narrative. It is to look at the distrustful of the categories, particularly of sexuality, that these are put into place and they don't necessarily fit, and that everyone has some abnormality in their view of their sexual orientation as well as pieces of their sexuality. Now, gender theories in the global perspective, as we start to look at this, again, we start to look at the general theories that have come into place. The status of many women declined during the colonial period because men owned them. We see the conflict pieces coming into place, and we see the development of modernization theory after World War II, and starting to look at women at a different perspective worldwide. So we see that gender projects such as the World Bank helping to modernize things, helping to reach for some of those gender issues are significantly brought into place. As you explore these, you'll look at these theories and see how women's rights are also involved within the process. As we finish using theory here, don't panic. These theories are to raise questions about gender and how it works. You need this as a tool to kind of see the rest of the course moving forward. That's why I'm leaving these PowerPoints there for you at that full picture of understanding how we look at the development and the changing issues within society. As you explore this week the two videos, the rest of the historic piece of gender issues that are coming to place with the women's movement, I'm hoping that you turn back to some of these theories and you look at how things are identified and women dominate or men dominate, the oppression between, how women become important in that process. So for a better definition of queer theory, or a more advanced one, I've linked you to a Wikipedia source. Now, I tell you that Wikipedia you have to be careful with because you don't know who's entered it, and never use it in a research paper. But it's a great starting point to understand things at a different level. And queer theory often sets people off as we explore what goes on with it. Queer theory here is reviewed at a little bit deeper level than our book gives you, and gives you the history of coming together and the backgrounds and the political identity. The other link is also to a Wikipedia source. This Wikipedia source talks about other gender theories as we talk about gender studies. Now, I mentioned family studies and gender studies use these other theories that come into place. And so the psychoanalytical theory, the feminist psychoanalytical theory, the postmodern influence, the development of gender theories and women's studies and men's studies. And these are additional to what our course has a chance to talk about within the text. Finally, what I think is the most exciting piece for this week's work are the second parts of Makers, Women Who Made America. Part 2 and 3 are linked to here. As we finish understanding that social movement that helps us explore gender at a deeper level. Your discussion board for the week takes you to which theories in chapter 3 make the most sense to you. Are you concerned about any of these theories? And finally, your questions for the week for this module is answer number 6. Number 6 takes us out to the United Nations development programs and to see what has changed in the world as we start to explore those latter theories of what's going on with the world and the women in the world in general, as well as the effect it has on men. So, question again will go in the Dropbox. I don't have the link here. I will make sure that gets there before this video is posted and the course is open. From this point forward, the modules will be built as I know a little bit more about you as we enter the course. Have a great day.